Let's get some reaction now. The Democratic Alliance's Member of Parliament, Emma Powell, joins us live from Cape Town. Emma, thank you so much for the time then. Let's get the DA's reaction to this.
Well, we would concur with the presidency that this action is indeed deeply unfortunate. The United States is, of course, free and must act in their own national and security interests. The comments made by Ambassador Rasool, we believe, were unwise, especially on such a public platform. And, of course, one would expect that that kind of sentiment would result in an expression or a démarche from the USA. That is to be expected. But we see this as very troubling in light of the urgent need for South Africa to find, to map, you could say, a pathway with the United States towards what we would call de-escalation and stabilization of our bilateral relationship. And the events of the last 24 hours certainly have not helped towards that end.
Allow me to be the devil's advocate here. Can you blame the ambassador, considering that since he's been brought back into this position and ultimately since January the 20th, when Donald Trump was officially inaugurated as US president, Mr. Rasool has not been able to get any kind of conversation with the Trump administration in order to help clear the air, and ultimately then perhaps some frustration creeping in?
Look, it's the role of a diplomat to be diplomatic, especially when you are operating on foreign territory. And it's in that context that I say that Ambassador Rasool's remarks on a public platform, I understand that it was supposed to be a private Mr. briefing. Nevertheless, one does not make comments that are potentially inflammatory or egregious. So I do believe that his comments were unwise in the context. I will not comment on the substance of the comments themselves, but ultimately what we have heard from Ambassador Rasool is that he has indeed been meeting on an almost daily basis with members of Congress and with other very well-placed interlocutors in DC, trying to find a pathway towards de-escalation and stabilization. What we really need, and this is what the DA has been saying for a number of weeks, what we really need is for the presidency to expedite the GNU's delegation to the United States to go and speak on an official bilateral basis with administrative officials from Trump's administration. We need the presidency to send those delegates very soon. The situation is grave. It cannot wait. And we need to work together in mapping a pathway. Now, in having said that we need to work towards de-escalation, it's also important for me as a representative of South Africa and the South African people to remind the United States that the relationship is indeed reciprocal, that a strong and cordial relationship with South Africa does indeed benefit the United States. We're a very geostrategically placed country. We sit between three continents. We have access to very, very crucial shipping lanes, potential spaces for military bases. And so a cordial relationship is, in fact, in both nations' interests. We also are seeing an unusual trend of these diplomatic squabbles being litigated, you could say, on social media, which is not typical of the way in which states usually engage one another. So we're operating in unusual times. Our call as the Democratic Alliance is for the presidency to please expedite the GNU delegation to Washington so that we can map out a pathway towards building on our traditionally very strong and productive trade aid and security relations.
All right. How do we de-escalate this, however, when fear-mongering is ultimately still part of our own narrative as a country? And I say that because of the likes of AfriForum, and in some parts, even your own party, some would say that, people are just ultimately going to take land from people without compensation, and that there's just land grabs that is obviously assumed as a misrepresentation then by the United States, which isn't true. And it seems then from the US side, there's no desire at all to even have these discussions. So how do we expedite a government of national unity set of delegates then to the United States in that case?
Well, let me be clear on one thing. The Democratic Alliance has made a number of public statements clarifying that at present, There are no arbitrary state-sponsored land grabs taking place. We are concerned about the future implications of the Expropriation Act, specifically the nil compensation clause, and it is for that reason that the Democratic Alliance has taken the act to court in order to potentially amend the act for just and equitable compensation in line with upholding and safeguarding private property rights. So the DA at no point has peddled the narrative that there is state-sponsored expropriation on an arbitrary basis happening in South Africa. I myself was in Washington, D.C. 2 weeks ago, and in every single engagement that I had with both members of Congress on the House side and the Senate side, as well as the State Department officials and representatives of President Donald Trump's government, we clarified that point. So at no point has the DA been party to any fear-mongering or narrative peddling that is antithetical to South Africa's interests. We represent South Africa. We are proud South Africans, and we will defend our flag.
Yeah.
I cannot AfriForum or Solidarity sentiments. They are a lobby group. They're a paid membership union, and they are welcome to and free to engage as their members mandate them to.
But this is why I asked then, off the back of them being allowed, and obviously, as you said, freedom of speech and allowed to do so, can we then de-escalate a situation when you have that kind of commentary coming from them as well? And then wouldn't a GNU leadership that then leads to the United States still almost be a farce in a way, since there are disagreements still that we have internally within ourselves and political parties about the expropriation bill act itself?
Look, we're free to have domestic squabbles and domestic differences. That's what the political landscape is about. But when it comes to defending South Africa, we take hands and we unite in defending our country. And I believe that that is what a GNU delegation will do. Now, the Trump administration has expressed a number of concerns. Their concerns are not just about property rights. Their concerns are about the treatment of Afrikaner minorities in terms of the broad-based Black economic empowerment. Their concerns are with regards to the ANC's engagements with some of the enemies of freedom, countries like Iran. So there are a number of disputes here. It's you saw in the executive order, President Donald Trump referencing potential nuclear cooperation with Iran.
Yep.
So there are a number of areas of discussion that need to take place. Now, we have a democratically elected government. The presidency is putting that delegation together. There are established diplomatic channels that formal delegation will begin negotiating on a formal government-to-government level, and misperceptions can be clarified at that point. The United States is absolutely free to act in their national security interests.
Yeah.
But so is South Africa. So I think that what we need to do is join hands as South Africans in firstly defending our flag, and secondly in saying, right, we call for a de-escalation, we call for stabilization, and we call on President Donald Trump's government to come to the negotiating table in terms of explaining what is required of them from South Africa, and our government then making a determination on what is and is not appropriate. We as the DA have warned for a long time that the ANC's party political foreign dalliances are at the detriment of South Africa's continued economic growth and development. But as I say, when it comes to litigating matters of national importance on the international stage, as South Africans, we are duty-bound to defend our flag, and that is what we will do.